Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, where you are. Good afternoon from Hawaii. I've been asked today to talk briefly about the notion of academic leadership, and I thought it would be useful to recall in a structural sort of way where we are with respect to the major factors which are affecting the globe. If we could have the next slide, please. The we stand in a constant interaction between the fourth industrial revolution and what has become the extraordinary behavior of the COVID pandemic. Even several weeks ago when I was asked to do this and I started, I thought that the world would be much different than it is today. And we see the uptake of the virus in places all over the globe with enormous effect. So there's a presumption here, and a kind of egocentric presumption, that we can stand at this pivotal moment and pretend that we know what the world is like. I just finished reading a group of books about pandemics, and we are in the midst of what epidemiologists refer to as a once-in-a-century pandemic. The consequences of it are, of course, unknown. With that as nevertheless background, I thought it'd be interesting to look at some basic elements of academic leadership and to consider how they play in this context. The first thing I thought of when I considered my own institutional positions for many years, I was in administration in one way or another at the University of Hawaii for almost 20 years. I think that there's this thing called institutional acumen, which is having a multidimensional sense of both how one's institution works and how it should work, the actual and the more desirable. I know for many a night I would go to bed and be fully aware of how it was working and wondering if how it should work compared favorably with that. So I think that's a constant in academic leadership. And it's worthwhile not to, I think, ignore it, let it go beyond us. And the other is a sense that we'll explore quite a bit in this session in what I call a societal vision, having a realistic sense of both what one's surrounding society is and its fundamental elements, an informed sense of what it might be, given the realities of the drivers of social change. What we heard in the last 2 hours, in some respect or another, especially in Professor Mock's presentation, is right at the cusp of this interface between what it is and what it could be, being driven by powerful social change. Next slide, please. So I thought we'd begin by talking about what I think are some fundamentals, what we all pretty much know, but the fact that we know them doesn't mean they're not important. So I thought it'd be useful to put this in the forefront of our considerations. And let me just say this one: despite the perhaps unprecedented conditions of change within which we find ourselves, we are propelled by this interface between the pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution. And academic leadership, however it proceeds, is going to be framed in both in the strategic and operational sense by these activities. They won't be out there for us to look at every day. They aren't going to be in the front pages of the newspaper. But when we go in the office in the morning and say, what does this institution knows? Both of those factors are going to be there. And we all operate simultaneously within the interface between strategic and operational factors. And strategic factors, just for the sake of having a definition, are those that embody the broad social, economic, and political elements that make up the many environments within which higher education operates. Strategic analysis seeks to theorize, be theoretically critical, and understand at multiple levels the many variables that constitute these environments. It's essentially what higher education theory and analysis is about in universities and research institutes all over the world. Operational factors are what we tend to live with in our institutions on the day-to-day basis, and they embody all of the elements that collectively make up the institutional components. And they too are in constant interaction with the changing circumstances. And even when we aren't having a crisis, as we are now, we have found that these operational factors have powerful change environments and put in place. I won't go into it now, but we've done work over the last 4 or 5 years, some of it with our colleagues at Lingnan and throughout the region, on how the doctoral degree has changed, the PhD degree has changed, and why it has changed, and what are the consequences of it doing so. I think one of the ways, if you're a senior administrator, really an administrator at any level within a higher educational institution, it makes sense to have an awareness, a deep awareness, that you're living in an environment which is in a constant state of change. Now, it's important to continually remind oneself of this, I think, because we live in worlds, in the institutional world, where there's so much routine, and the routine sometimes overwhelms us and blinds us from seeing both the strategic factors, which should guide our attention, and to be more clever and sophisticated and rational with the operational factors. Next slide, please. Prior to the pandemic, and for the last several years, I and my colleagues, including our colleagues at Lingnan, have been trying to figure out what the fourth industrial revolution is going to look like as a set of new strategic factors for higher education. And I thought in this context, it would be useful just to read together a few of these quotes. Building on the third industrial revolution, the mass development of electronics and information technology, which becomes the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, has been identified as the growing fusion of physical technology, software, and biology. It encompasses virtually all new and developing technological applications and is creating rapid changes in the ways people live, work, and are interrelated worthwhile. This was Schwab's pronouncement of this at the World Economic Conference in 2016. And I think it pays some reading that carefully, because really what it says is virtually everything that we know within a higher education environment is on a pathway to change. And that is not a comfortable situation for most of us to be in. But one might argue, and I'm one of the people who would argue, that the better course of wisdom is to face up to how profound these changes are likely to be, and try to position our institutions appropriately. Next slide, please. From this, I think we can say that, as Schwab says, the response to it must be integrated and comprehensive, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society. Easily said, hard to do. And once again, living in the midst of the pandemic allows us to look past this revolution, which was well on the way to happening before the onset of COVID-19. And when we master COVID-19 and try to go back to something that we will describe as normal, we will discover that the elements of the fourth industrial revolution have been proceeding along not only at pace, but in fact stimulated by the crisis itself. So Schwab goes on, in this regard, the advent of the fourth industrial revolution constitutes a major set of novel strategic factors for our generation. Our generation is fundamentally different than the one that preceded it. The generation prior to 2016 and the generation after 2016 are fundamentally different. And there are a host of kinds of research that we can do to demonstrate this in the various ways in which industry and finance and et cetera, have proceeded. Next slide, please. So a sampling of important elements of the emergent revolution. I just picked out these 4 aspects of research that will benefit from currently advancing technology, and see in your own institution whether these have any effect. Reducing research costs and timelines. Now, one of the things that we saw in the pandemic, certainly in the United States and in Europe and in India and in other kinds of places, is that crisis allows you to do things that you can't do in other kinds of situations. So the fourth industrial revolution can be seen as a kind of crisis, which simply allows us to do things in a way that we didn't do before. A second variable here are the transforming operations, how we do things. And we heard some conversation. I heard Kaho talk at length about how the pandemic had in effect, I'll use my language rather than his, caused Lingnan to transform its operations because it simply couldn't do what it did before. And what this argument says is that it won't need the pandemic to do this. This will happen routinely as a matter of the kinds of social changes that will be proceeding out of the fourth industrial revolution. And these enhance the research and development processes. Again, we could talk at considerable length about how this, in fact, has happened with the pandemic. And what we did in the pandemic was something never been done in the history of the world, which is create a vaccine within a year. If you had said that to 99 out of 100 scientists 2 years ago, they would have told you you're mad. But crisis simply allows you to do things that you otherwise could not do. And that leads to the fourth aspect, is that innovation comes to be based on new ideas and theories, not simply modifications of what we have come to expect, but where there's genuine novelty involved. Breakstone argues that the IR, fourth IR, augments human efficiency and productivity. It enhances the human ability to innovate in these 3 ways: by creating space for innovation. And once again, we have done that over the last 5-6 years, stimulated by the pandemic. By finding novel patterns in data, analyzing trends, and generating new data sets and research designs. We could talk for a long time about this, but once again, the literature, which is just blossoming out about the fourth industrial revolution, is largely about how it allows us to do these kinds of things. And by demonstrating creativity and thus allowing professionals to exercise their abilities and contribute more flexibly. I would interpret what Kaho talked about just a while ago is the Lingnan faculty demonstrating its creativity. And once again, that is stimulated by the crisis of COVID and not by the fourth industrial revolution. But I want to continue to make the argument that the nature of these crises is not separable. They're occurring at the same time. And we could have a long conversation, and I've got just a bit of a slide here on it, about what the future of distance education is going to be over the next 5 to 8 years. And it's, I think, quite remarkable. Next slide, please. So I tried to pick out some trends that will show up here with some of the operational implications. One is changes in the purpose of teaching. Deane says the purpose of education has transformed into leading innovations and practices. We are much less involved in teaching the rising generation what the previous generation has learned, and much more in trying to instruct the rising generation into being innovators themselves, and to expand their creativity. Once again, if you just look at the language that Kaho used in talking about Lingnan, and the notion of creativity, imagination, and critical thinking, I think are all part of that. The second trend is changes in teaching methods and settings. And once again, you can just see what Kaho described as that. But we need to recognize that that's happening all over the world, and it's happening in different kinds of ways. What was happening prior to the pandemic in terms of what we were calling distance education has opened up into a subject matter radically different from that. And if you're interested, I invite you to send me an email, and I'd be happy to share a good deal of references with you. But the digital tools which are becoming available to teachers gives them platforms for more interactive teaching activities far beyond what we thought of 10, 12 months ago as online education. And we've all been experiencing online education. What I think we need to realize is that the variations and the differences that have occurred have been rather extraordinary. Next, please. The third trend are changes in the teaching of content, in teaching settings and methods. I use the example here, the flipped classroom, in part because it has been so widely adopted in so many places, but it literally changes the relationship between the faculty member as the articulator and pronouncer of received wisdom, and empowers the student as the thinker, as the learner, as the person to use the faculty member as a resource for their own development. The fourth changes are changes in assessment and feedback, and this is a long subject that everybody who has tried to run a university is deeply involved in. But part of the argument that I'm finding in the literature is that all of that structure that we put in terms of the notion of having fixed final examinations based upon fixed content may be on the way out. And if so, it will be a revolution of significant proportion. And finally, the fifth trend here are changes in the role of teachers. Once again, as we say in the United States, we have moved from the notion of the sage on the stage, the source of all relevant knowledge, to the guide on the side for the teacher. The purpose of the teacher is not to do what everyone's laptop can do 1,000 times better, which is fill the student's head with data, but to encourage ways of thinking and to provide the kinds of avenues that will allow students to experience their own creativity. Next, please. So just quickly, because I'm almost have no time here, I just wanted to suggest some of the strategic implications of this, that AI becomes vital for human ability to innovate by creating space for innovation, by finding novel patterns in data, analyzing trends, generating new data by democratizing creativity, etc. Colburn, Anderson, and Stern furthermore assert that AI has the capacity to change the innovation process itself. This will require future scientists and technologists to have more disciplinary training and knowledge. Next, please. And then the operational implications. The open question is, how will higher education institutions face issues of staying current with the changes being brought about by the fourth AR? An enormous question. Might curricula change to keep abreast? Should we reorganize higher education structures to make them more responsive? Might the existing structures of the professoriate change to promote more rapid social change, and if so, how? Next, please. And here, that's where I meant to end. And here I've just selected 5 references that, if you're interested in this subject at all, I think each of these will get you thinking in a useful and provocative way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Neubauer, for your insightful talks on both strategic and operational implications of these factors on higher education, academic leadership processes and practices. In my presentation today, I would like to mention 4 main points. First, current context and demand for change in Vietnamese higher education. Second, challenges to leaders of higher education in Vietnam. Third, opportunities after COVID-19. And fourth, reshaping Vietnamese higher education leaders thinking for action with the current context of and practices of the University of Social Science and Humanities, Vietnam National University during the COVID-19. Firstly, as for the current context and demand for change in Vietnamese higher education, it is safe to say that not only Vietnam, but also other countries around the world have been experiencing uncertainties during such a lingering COVID-19 pandemic. The unpredictability and unexpected impact of the COVID-19 has actually considerably influenced on the current management system of higher education and brought out both the challenges and opportunity for higher education institutions. Let me move on to the second point, the challenges to the leaders of higher education in Vietnam. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19, the demand for internationalization of higher education has become more pressing than ever. Moreover, there has been harsh competition among higher education institutions, among local institutions, and between local and international institutions. What's more, when the law on education, the new law has been effective, most public higher education institutions have undergone external and internal pressure of institutional autonomy, especially on finance. One more challenge that has been mentioned in Professor Neubauer is the rapid change of ICT and educational technology owing to the fourth industrial revolution has also made a great impact on all walks of life in Vietnam. So higher education is not an exception. The opportunities after the COVID-19, in my opinion, may outweigh the threats in the current context. In fact, key stakeholders, I mean institutional leaders and middle administrators, teachers and students and society have a more proactive attitude toward the use of virtual learning system than ever before due to the COVID-19. They, especially society, are also more open-minded and get more readiness and higher adaptabilities to changes, especially the shift from on-campus learning to virtual one. In light of the aforementioned challenges and opportunities, I suggest reshaping Vietnamese higher education leaders thinking for action as follows. First, a need to foster growth mindset among both institutional and middle administrators. Second, the need to apply system thinking, especially in the context of Vietnam. And third, more serious analysis and evaluation of current conditions for better respond the emergent issues and changing change. Next, the higher level of flexibility and adaptability needed. Next is the greater efforts and more feasible solution needed for stronger financial viability. And we need also the better communication of institutional image and competition advantages. And last but not least is the promoting better internationalization of higher education for local program and campus. And how our university, the University of Social Sciences and Humanities, Vietnam National University action in the confluence of the fourth industrial revolution and the COVID-19, what we have been done, and also as the first female president of the university in more than 60 years of our university establishment and development. My own definition of leadership is that leadership is creating an enabling environment that all members of an institutional can develop their capabilities to the fullest or maximize their own potential so as to achieve its shared goals. With reference to the four trends just presented by Professor Neubauer, I would like to share about what our university has done. About the trend number one is there are the changes in the purpose of teaching. The purpose of education has transformed into leading innovation and practices. Since the year 2019, our university has publicized its core values, creativity, leadership, responsibility, based on its educational philosophy, home-person, liberal, multicultural, translated into action. These core values have been integrated into curriculum design, pedagogical practices, assessment and evaluation, technology in education, quality assurance, and students' extracurricular activities. Designs in line with the university strategic plan in the period of 2015 2020, alumni liaison board at the university, faculty and department levels were founded in the year 2017 and have organized many significant activities promoting the bond between alumni while supporting them and the development of the institution. the USH Alumni Liaison Office has boots the industry university link with the USH alumni support to remote activities related to innovation and startups in the university. And about the trend number 2, number 3, and number 4 related to the changes in teaching setting and method, in content, in assessment, and in the roles of teachers. I cannot agree with Professor Neubauer more. Along with the development of science and technology, teaching and learning are always improved, advanced, and more effective. The world of teaching and learning nowadays is being shaped by different phenomena, a larger, more demanding, and more diverse student body, pervasive language and quality and accountability, rapidly changing science and technology, and expectations by students and employers that graduates will be equipped for rapidly changing, globalizing, and challenging workplaces. However, effective teaching has to be predicated on an understanding of how students learn. The objective of the activities is to bring about learning, and there has to be insight and knowledge about learners needed for teaching to be successful. Teaching and learning, much more than transmitting knowledge and skills, refer more to empowering students to find their own ways to become an engaged citizen who takes an active role in contributing to the public good, to create change, and to facilitate the sustainable development of the world. It is due to the COVID-19 that changed the teaching setting and method in Vietnam in general and in our institution in particular have taken place as a matter of course. And the acceptance of online teaching and learning has gone faster than ever before the emergence of the COVID-19. The institution has directed faculties and functional office to modify academic requirements on the integration of online learning into curriculum, so that online learning and teaching has been legitimate. In fact, the faculties have worked out the appropriate portion of the virtual section into the syllabi. Since the year 2020, every course can be taught virtually in 20% and well presented in each syllabi. As for changes in assessment, never thesis or dissertation defense session have been acceptable to go virtually in Vietnam until the COVID-19 did come to existence in late 2019. With uncertainties happening to the world, such as COVID-19, internationalization of higher education, particularly on the curriculum, proves to be a transformative step for our university to offer two ways of student mobility for students to keep moving forward with their study at home institution in case of cross-border limits among the countries around the world. According to the strategic plan of Vietnam National University in Ho Chi Minh City in the period of 2021 to 2025, in a vision to 2030, it is addressed as follows: developing international training programs so as to prepare human resources with high competitiveness in international labor market, with preference to the Vietnam National University strategy. Vietnam National University, Ho Chi Minh City is our umbrella. Its member university, including our university, is on the way to some last important step to finalize its strategic plan, in which the internationalization of its undergraduate training program is a cornerstone for its development strategy in the period of the 2021 and 2025, enabling our university to become a leading institution in the region. Our university commitment to experiential learning with integrated internship, local as well as abroad, enable students to experience area of work related to their academic subjects and to explore career opportunities. USHH does provide unlimited opportunities for multicultural friendship and intercultural exchange with values beyond boundaries. The most important practice of USHH leaders in coping with the considerable impact of the COVID-19, the institution top leaders managed to balance between what key stakeholders demand and what the institution has really have. It is safe to say that as a female leader with gender-defined traits, caring and nurturing, I have exercised my leadership with a combination of both we skill, someone who invite the participation of stakeholder, and I skill, someone who is willing to make difficult decisions and be held accountable for them. I have focused much on promoting the sense of belonging of the university staff and the love for the university of the USHH lovers to meaningful and relevant activities. They are change agents that motivate its staff and lovers intrinsically, right from their insights to contribute their own physical, mental, and spiritual resources for a shared mission, a better day by day institution. In recent time, businesses have made invaluable contribution to the development of our university as it continues to grow. This growth would not be possible without the vital role played by its partner in educational cooperation, providing scholarship for students, employment cooperation, and the sponsoring of many facilities for the university, and most importantly, the invaluable emotional support for the continued growth of the institution with academic staff. When the university carry out shifting the delivery mode from face-to-face to online teaching, I have been fully aware of the technology literacy gap between junior and senior lecturer, and think of ways to create the utmost comfort for lecturer to teach online. In fact, with senior lecturers of low tech, a group of IT members are at hand 24/7 days, 24 hours and 7 days a week to give immediate support if they encounter technical difficulty or problems. Or the university set up a classroom well equipped with network connectivity interactive board, camera, loudspeaker for teacher to teach as they are in real classroom, but without the physical presence of students. Therefore, with adaptability to COVID-19, despite of many changes related to working styles, teaching, assessment, and so on at our university is the very low for the USHH from all the lecturers and staff. That in solidarity, we all have shaped successfully and overcome the negative impact of the COVID-19 on all activity of our universities. That is all what I would like to share with you all about how COVID-19 had influenced higher education in Vietnam, particularly at the University of Social Sciences and Humanities, Vietnam National University in Ho Chi Minh City, and how our university has acted to make appropriate and necessary changes. Change or not change, that matters most in the confluence of the fourth industrial revolution and COVID-19. Thank you for your attention.